Assalamu alaikum. I recently put out a video about ex-Muslims and how I was fascinated by the fact that they would call themselves and identify themselves as ex-Muslims instead of just continuing with their lives in whatever they'd chosen to become. And I was discussing with one of the brothers actually who suggested to me, because I have a fascination with psychology, why don't you try and look into it from a psychological perspective? So I thought, that's a good idea. So I had a quick look. I looked at some of the, I don't want to name names today, but in general, I mean, we know who the most prolific ex-Muslims in the forefront, who they are, and the things that they say. And quite often we find what they say is very strange. We can't necessarily rationalize why they would say a particular thing when it doesn't seem to make any sense. But they still continue to say it, and it seems that their fan base enjoys it. And I think that's where the key is, in the attention. So I'm going to start, I'll try and go through this quickly because I don't want this to be too long and boring. One of the key things is, I think, what happens to us when we're children. Do you have a stable upbringing or a non-stable upbringing? In terms of instability, that could be from bullying at school or being bullied outside, something like that. We'll take that separately. Could be from the parents, or maybe the parents were divorced, maybe step parents, because we know with step parents, for example, what can happen is the step parent comes in and can resent the children that are there from a different parent. This is an effect that you see sometimes when you have step parents come in. Or maybe the parents were, especially in the case of ex-Muslims, when we're talking about the parents would be Muslims, if they were not practicing Muslims, or they weren't treating the children properly according to the Quran and Sunnah, or they were deviant, or they just ignored the children, they just left them to their own devices. All of these things where we see people acting opposite to the teachings of Islam, and bringing their kids up in such a way. Or maybe the relationship issues between the husband and the wife, the mother and the father, sorry. Maybe there was some sort of fighting or a divorce or something like this, you never know. Bullying is a big one. When you're a child, when you're growing up, being different from others is a very bullies at school will pick on any small difference. Bullies are weak people that look to pick on people that are less socially or physically strong than they are, because that they believe that can amplify their feeling of importance. And our feeling of importance is like oxygen to us. We want to exist. We want other people to know that we're there. This is a huge driver in psychology. From bullying, there's a great deal of suffering. We know this. A'udhu billah, a lot of suicide attempts, a lot of suicides come from bullying. This has been seen in recent times as well. And I think that these issues that they have when they're growing up, they blame on Islam. So they use Islam as the scapegoat, as the placeholder to put all of their blame. Especially if that person is, let's say, the only Muslim. Maybe they were living in a different country, like in a European country, and the family were Muslims, but the child grew up in a non-Islamic country as a Muslim. Someone different. So the bullies will pick on that. Maybe the child will then think to themselves, I'm going to blame Islam. The reason I got picked on was because of Islam. They make a decision to blame something and then go down that route. Possible identity crisis results from that. So you try and act out how you want other people to perceive you. So that's just some things on childhood issues. And of course, non-practicing parents, they're not going to teach their children where to get knowledge from, or the Quran, or anything about the life of the Prophet Mohammed ﷺ, or the Sahabas radiallahu anhum, or any of these solid role models. They'll start to look around for other role models, especially if the parents are ignoring the child or the teenager, or as they grow up. They'll look for a different way to get attention. So I've seen this as well recently, where people grew up without really being practicing Muslims. This can lead to corrupt intentions, the social context that you live in as well. Social proof is an extremely powerful psychological concept. We want to look to the people that are around us for proof as to how we act. And if you don't have that strength of iman, that moral compass from the Quran and the Sunnah, you're just going to get it from your surroundings. So without a solid grounding in the deen, in terms of knowledge and understanding, people can get married, have kids, and then when their kids want to find out about Islam, or they want to teach their kids about Islam, they have absolutely no idea how to go about it. And this can lead to people looking in the wrong places. Just go and do a Google search, and subhanallah, Allah musta'an, what you're going to get back. People have no idea where they're getting their information from. It's the same kind of phenomena as if you get sick and you ask Google, what's wrong with me? You're going to get freaked out. And it's the same thing with learning about complex religions like Islam, or any religion in fact. Google's probably not the best place to start. So this can lead to all sorts of problems. So this is why it's very important for us to learn about our religion and to teach our children about the religion and how to learn. It's not just a case of go and look up something. It's how do we understand where we take our information from? How do we interpret that information? What's the context? What's the chain of narration? What is the chain of narration? How do we validate the chain of narration? All of that kind of thing. So I think what happens here after saying all this is that an issue happens in childhood, or as the person is growing up as a Muslim, identifying as a Muslim, and because of that issue they use Islam as something that they can blame for all of the issues they had. They don't want to blame their mum, they don't want to blame their dad, they don't want to blame their friends, but they want to blame something which is kind of almost non-tangible. But then of course we have the Prophet Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the they run always to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and say, this is the person that brought Islam, so this is the person I'm going to blame. Everything is from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is why you hear in their rhetoric, the religion brought by Muhammad, the Muhammadan religion, I'm an ex-Muhammadan. So Islam is blamed. And then evidence for that blame is continuously sought. It's like what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever the proof is sought, they'll find it, and they'll find a way to interpret it such that it validates what they've done, which is made a choice to hate Islam and blame it for all the problems that they have had growing up, or issues that they've had. And this manifests a disproportional hatred for Islam, the thing they've chosen to hate. And obviously then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because they consider him the figurehead of the religion that was brought, they'll start saying all sorts of things to corroborate the idea, like, well, he must have made up the Quran, he must have invented it. Then they go out searching for evidence in the various places that again validate what they're thinking. And this is why I believe when you see interviews with these people, they make ridiculous claims, they say ridiculous things, but for them it doesn't matter, because the person they're arguing with is not the enemy is Islam for them. So this behaviour, I believe, in my very limited experience in reading about psychology, comes from something called commitment and consistency. It's a very powerful principle. If you want to find out more, you can read the book Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini. He talks about 6 principles. He calls them weapons of influence, and commitment and consistency is one of those, which is extraordinarily powerful. Why? Because as human beings, we desire to be consistent. There's so many examples of situations where inconsistent behaviour is seen as untrustworthy or non-beneficial. So it's something that in society we've grown up to feel like it's obligatory to be consistent, or it's extremely beneficial to be consistent. So we subconsciously seek out consistency. But commitment and consistency go together. Once you've made a decision to commit to something, the further down the path you walk, the less likely it is you're going to want to come back and choose a different path. So you go down that path you choose, you commit, and you're consistent. Again, this matches very well with what we see in the ex-Muslim community. Commitment and consistency to a path, regardless of logic, regardless of discussions with others. In fact, discussions with others, even if they're sensible, someone brings a sensible point, they'll find any reason to avoid the point, to reject the point, to avoid real confrontation on the point. even to the point in live interviews, they'll say the strangest things. So like I said, so Islam is to blame. That's the mindset. So whatever evidence I bring, even if it's false, it doesn't matter. I need to prove to people that Islam is bad. It's a highly subjective issue, like a psychological issue. This is the part that's the most interesting for me, the attention. So go and search up Dr. Jordan Peterson. Dr. Jordan Peterson, attention. You find some really interesting videos where he talks about the desire for attention is the desire for existence. If we don't have attention from other people, it's as if we don't exist. And not existing is not an option for human beings. We have to be recognized by others. So what better way to get recognized? And we all know if you're creating content in social media, I'm not going to say the best way, but one of the optimum ways to get attention is by being controversial. Recently I watched a video of Dr. Jordan Peterson where he was discussing how far, to what lengths certain people will go to get attention, to be considered as relevant, as alive, as existing. These horrific, horrible, heinous acts of egregious violence like school shootings. Some of the perpetrators of these horrific crimes were interviewed afterwards if they were caught, if they didn't commit suicide, and the origin of their desire to carry out these horrific acts was rooted in the need to be recognized. It's for them, it's better to have done something, even if it's horrific, than nothing at all, and go down in history as at least of having existed. It's something that I cannot even contemplate. But for some people, the desire for attention becomes so extreme that they're willing to do almost anything to get it. Yeah, there's something in psychology called a confirmation bias. Most of you, I'm sure, have heard of it, but it's basically where we seek out evidence, whatever it is, in any matter that we're addressing, to confirm the bias that we have already. So it's the kind of the height of subjectivity. In addition to confirmation bias, there's another fascinating psychological trait attributable to humans, which is called cognitive dissonance. I'm going to read one small passage from the book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, by Rolf Dobelli. He said, suppose you apply for a job and discover that you have lost out to another candidate. Instead of admitting that the other person was better suited, you convince yourself that you didn't want the job in the first place. You simply wanted to test your market value and see if you could get invited for an interview. So you convince yourself when you failed to achieve something that you didn't actually want it anyway. And I think this is another interesting psychological context to consider in the subject we're discussing. I think this idea of having like an issue in the childhood or during the upbringing, or at some point in your life, some traumatic issue happened, and due to the social context that particular person was in, they've decided to blame Islam for all of the problems and issues that they've had. So this is why you see people posting, ex-Muslims posting pictures, typically with dogs, with bacon, with alcohol, because it's the antithesis of Islam. It's what they want to show to themselves. This is what I represent because I hate Islam so much. And I'm going to show it to all these other people because I know it's controversial and it's going to bring me attention. And I must vilify, I must demonize as much as possible. Even to the point where people that they say they've apostated and become atheists, they don't talk about other religions, they talk only about Islam. So I think all of these things, for me, in my mind, add up. That there's some kind of issue. Islam becomes the scapegoat for it, and this then helps them to cover up the pain of whatever it is they experienced or are still experiencing. Commitment and consistency drives them down the path, and once they've reached a particular point, it's very difficult psychologically for them to return because they've invested so much in it. So I think the thought process in the minds of some of these people is that I will blame all of my issues, or a huge number of my issues, on Islam. I'll make it the subject of my hatred, and then I will be able to get, not only that, I don't actually have to face up to where my actual problems are. Then I can just blame it on something, even though it's not really the problem, I can blame it on something else. Then not only that, in doing this, I can actually get a huge amount of attention, which is going to validate my existence, and for sure that's going to make me happy. I think this is the mindset. So what just preceded in the video are really my thoughts on books I've read, videos I've watched, discussions I've had. I am by no means an expert claiming to be an expert in absolutely anything, especially psychology, but I feel I've seen parallels in the behaviour of some ex-Muslims, not all ex-Muslims by the way. I just want to make it clear that I'm talking with regards to the people that are using the ex-Muslim persona to define themselves in order to, what I feel, is to get attention. When what we should actually be doing is attempting to be as objective as we possibly can in searching for the truth. If this person doesn't agree with me, that's fine. That person doesn't agree with me, that's fine. If I don't agree with that person, that's fine. We can have a sensible discussion about it, whether it's with regards to science or religion. We bring our evidence, we discuss. There's no need to make fun, there's no need to call names, there's no need to get aggressive, but you know, it is what it is in the Twitter, YouTube, back and forth social media world. And I personally advise myself and others not to give too much attention to these people, because I think the amount of attention that they're trying to get and the way they're trying to get it is indicative of some kind of a deep-seated issue. I've always felt that when I get angry or frustrated, or I've in my life ever kind of verbally been aggressive towards someone, I've never found a benefit in that. I've never found, it's like the Prophet Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La taghdab, la taghdab, la taghdab." 3 times he said, "Don't get angry." And I remember sitting in a lecture once with a talib al-ilm who told me, everyone gets angry internally. You know, it's difficult not to get angry inside. You get frustrated inside. But the ghadab, the anger that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was referring to, was the manifest anger. So when we allow that anger to spill out and we just lose control, you see it with road rage, you see it in, you know, subhanAllah, back in the days before I was a Muslim, you know, and you'd see people in bars and pubs and stuff full of drink, and they, you know, they couldn't get any attention from ladies, so they just come out and that aggression spills over in fisticuffs, and they end up in hospital, and then the police have to pick them up, and the ambulances have to come, and you know, all sorts of negative things. Anger is never, in my personal opinion, a good way to address issues. The best way to address issues is by careful consideration, open discussion, attempting to be as objective as we possibly can. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. If I made any mistakes in this video, which I'm absolutely sure I did, that's all from me. I sincerely apologize. I hope that you, whoever's listening to this, will put me right and advise me in the best possible way. And looking forward to the comments.